had the first chapter of this training, there was a couple of sessions on CFC events. And one of the things that is certainly a reality is that when a campaign manager, like Curtis or Deborah Gale or some of the others who are in the room, want to do an event in their campaign, whether it's at the Pentagon or the NIH, or whether it's at the Air Traffic Control Center in Oklahoma City, they have to get approval from their ethics office. And every summer, we get together with the Interagency Ethics Council and go over our guidance to them. So we're trying to make sure that what we're training campaign managers to do is in sync with what the ethics officers are going to use in their decision tree to accept or not accept various events that might get proposed. So, so with that, what I wanted to do is go over with you what we are advising those ethics officers to do, when these things come up to them in the future. And so again, we want to kind of give you a little bit of a look at, how the CFC rules interact with the ethical decisions about having events, and why they're necessary. Because the CFC is the only campaign for federal workers, and it's got to be conducted during regular duty hours. So, if there's ways of building up the morale and the esprit de corps, we really want to be able to continue to do that. So as we, moved from 2016 to the sort of 2017 and beyond, a lot of electronic decisions needed to be made. As we moved away from paper, if electronics became a rule, there was a lot less approval for some of the face-to-face. But again, if you look at some of the trends that happen in marketing, you not only need the high tech, but you also need the high touch. You need to, cut through all the electronics that people are buried with every day and still have, face-to-face and hand-to-hand events, so that, when a campaign manager is considering proposing an event, we think they should do that, and that the answer is yes, because events give your colleagues the opportunity to hear directly from charities. It can help fuel increases not only in participation, but also in donors. It can be both about a cause as well as the overall CFC. And all of these things really do go toward boosting that morale. So as we roll into the CFC campaign, we have an entire schedule of promotional weeks that we'll tie into throughout the campaign once again. So as we look at these cause weeks, there are CFC charities and causes that are aligned with all of these. So it gives, a campaign manager the opportunity to tie in, with overall themes that, we or the outreach coordinator in your zone are promoting, as well as some of the national things. And we've all, many of you already know what Giving Tuesday is. It is the first or second largest day of contributions in the CFC, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. It's either first or second only to the last day of the campaign. And this year, the last day of the campaign will be January 15th. Admittedly, it's a federal holiday, but as the National Martin Luther King Day of Service, I think it's a fitting day to end the CFC. So we'll certainly be looking at a Start Strong week, a whole calendar of these cause weeks, Giving Tuesday, and really about a 2-week period for finish strong when people come back to work after the holidays, and then a thank you phase once we get past January 15th. Now, there are inside the government ethical concepts that you might not, if you're a charity and there may be an event at, Exxon or 7-Eleven or National Car Rental, there may be rules that we deal with inside the government that, ExxonMobil may not care about, or JCPenney. But, certainly sometimes to get people involved, people look to, campaign managers look to get prizes or gifts. Those kinds of prizes and gifts have got to be approved by ethics offices in advance. When there is an event that involves multiple charities, no cash can be collected. And I always make the distinction. Cash is either printed by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing or minted by the Department of Treasury, U.S. Mint. A check, a credit card, an electronic pledge is not cash. It is a cash equivalent. But, and we now have many other ways of allowing people to give with text messages, with a mobile app. So demonstrations of pledge systems can be made. Paper forms can be passed out. They can be collected, but no, they have to be collected safely and securely. Because if you're going to be collecting pledge forms, they have what we call in the government PII, and that's not March 14th. PI for the government is personally identifiable information. It's names, addresses, social security numbers, and other things that can't leak out. So paper forms are still usable. And even though the current CFC rules did sunset the use of forms 5 years after implementation, we are still allowing paper or PDFs of those paper forms to be done, especially in places like the post office, law enforcement, certain parts of the military, and others where government employees are not necessarily sitting behind a computer like I might do or Keith might do on a day-to-day basis. So when we talk to the ethics officers next week, we kind of give them 3 categories of events. What should they always approve? What should they approve with caution? And what should they never approve? So under the always approve, campaign kickoffs or victory events and any other sort of non-solicitation events that build support for the CFC are explicitly encouraged in CFC rules. Now, it is not a case where OPM says this is allowed unconditionally. The ethics office or the general counsel in every federal agency has the final say about what they'll allow in their agency. And they may allow certain things at the Veterans Administration that the Department of Justice may never allow. They may allow things at the NIH that the US courts might not allow. So we give them guidance, but it is their final decision. One thing that is a part of our rules is that no cost for food or entertainment at an event can be charged to the CFC. Doesn't mean a third party couldn't cover it, but you can't use appropriated funds to feed federal employees at their permanent duty station. So if a private person or campaign leaders wanted to foot the bill for cupcakes and juice, they can do that. And the events have to be undertaken with a spirit of generating interest for everyone, whether they participate in the CFC or not. And that's mostly because sometimes there might be a raffle or a drawing for some kind of a prize that a campaign manager has. No gift to the CFC can be required. If somebody wants to put their name in the hat to win that prize, we can't require them to give to the CFC. And it's only the local legal and ethical officials that know the rules. I mean, the rules in Minneapolis for lotteries and raffles and drawings may differ from the rules in LA or Houston or Miami or Washington. So that's why they've got to be involved in that. And so their particular ethical guidelines always come into play. And, we just want to make sure that they're not turning down events that they should be approving. Now, when those events take place, it's important to get charities involved fairly. And the local CFC zone outreach coordinators can help. Also, the outreach coordinator that is providing central campaign services also has a system in place to help make sure that we're not having CFC events with just the boss's favorite charity or the campaign manager's favorite charity involved. Now, as we started coming out of the pandemic last year, we've gotten a lot of feedback from campaign managers and others. Many of them, they wanted a local event. They wanted to really feature the local charities just at their organization or in close proximity to their organization. And in 2023, we will allow that. But if they want to do that event, they're going to have to sign up for a second event so that it's also fair to the national and international charities that might not participate. But even in markets like Seattle and San Francisco and LA, many cases we do find national charities headquartered in some of these cities in addition to the local charities. So if you're looking at proximity, you may still be able to pull in national and international causes. So you can, and if you are the EPA campaign manager and you want to request a charity or cause, we'll allow you to do that. But the rest of the population of charities you bring in, again, has to be randomly selected through the system that the Central Services Outreach Coordinator will assign. And then finally, if a federation member is already signed up for an event and something happens, rather than going back to the drawing board, we will allow the federation to substitute a charity if the original one has to drop out. Now, there are certainly events that we do just allow those ethics officers to take a look at a little bit more closely. If prizes are offered, they must be modest in nature and value. An agency parking space, free lunch in the cafeteria, or a gift card for Subway or Starbucks that's of modest value. And those modest values, there's probably guidelines in their own ethical rules about what that involves. If there's any fundraising that's happening, it's electronic. It's through the CFC system, mobile app, or texting. Charities are not allowed to directly raise money, sell material, or collect names. So no fish bowls for people to put in their business cards. You can't collect names. You can collect the names for a drawing, but the campaign manager needs to retain those and destroy the PII, the names and phone numbers or emails, once the drawing takes place. Agency head remarks are allowed. We don't want, again, the Secretary of the Navy or the Secretary of HHS to get up and talk about their favorite charity. But we do want them to encourage people to participate in the campaign. What's not allowed is setting goals of 100% participation or, you know, having people throw in $5 bills for a chili cook-off or a bake-off. And one charity speaker, fairly selected, can make remarks on behalf of all charities. Gift baskets of donated items that the campaign team might collect are allowed to be raffled off, but the CFC pledge card has a statement on it that no goods or services were provided in response to this pledge. I mean, that's kind of like the public radio or public TV. If you want the River Dance DVD, your gift is going to be deducted based on, you know, what the value of that is. We don't track those values, so that's really that's in the hands of the donor. So that's another reason to keep those minimally. Food and beverage, workers could pay out of personal funds, but not out of appropriated funds. And, you know, a charity fair on the cause of the week is allowed, but a charity fair on, you know, just Doctors Without Borders or the Wounded Warrior Project or St. Jude's would not be allowed. So it's you know, a charity fair can't represent just one organization. And then finally, there are things that the ethics office should not approve, and based on the training we give, the campaign manager shouldn't even ask for them to be approved. Again, it's probably beating the dead horse, but you know, CFC does not collect cash. We collect pledges. You know, if it is printed with a presidential portrait, we won't take it at a special event if it's struck by the U.S. Mint. So again, the one charity event would appear to be coercive. It might not be the way you run it, but it might appear that way to someone else. And, you know, the performance plan of the campaign worker cannot include, you know, CFC giving as a factor. And again, and we certainly don't trade in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or blockchain or anything else. Now, as we move into the 2023 campaign, a few things you're going to start to see. We did, you know, as you log into your charity site or to your CFC giving account, if you're a federal employee, we did implement multi-factor authentication back in February. We're going to be ratcheting that up this summer. So you will start to see login.gov. You may already have an account with login.gov. Those are free, but it's another way of doing what's called phishing resistant multi-factor authentication. As we go through the listing period this summer, charities have the option of giving us several specific jobs they need volunteers to do. So it's not just that So Others Might Eat or the Boy Scouts or FIA accept volunteers. They have the option to tell us what kind of jobs will those volunteers do. So when a federal employee is looking at the list, you know, they can see if their skills match up with specific jobs at specific charities. And hopefully that'll get them more engaged rather than just with generic volunteering. And last year we did allow employees on their own to track their volunteer hours and for groups of employees to track their volunteer hours, but that's still going to be on the individual employee or the campaign manager of the group. We're not reporting that out to charities. So I hope that this gives you a little bit better idea of what we advise the ethics offices to do. And we're hoping they could actually be here today, but their meeting is next week, so I'll be participating with them next week. And I will stop there and see if there are any questions about this.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
So this is Anna from CareNet. I noticed on, what was it, slide 10, about not collecting names. At our table, we usually have like a sign up list for newsletters. So if people want a newsletter, they can do their name and email. We don't solicit for names. So is that no longer allowed?
You could do that, but you have to do that with their personal email.
Correct,
You
not their
cannot-
.gov.
Yeah. So if there's a fishbowl with business cards that has their government email address, you've got to communicate with people on their Apple or Gmail or private email account, not their government email account. That's never going to get approved.
Okay, that's understandable. Thank you.
Sure. Yes, you can get the PowerPoint slides. As with the first week session, we will put links to these on OMB Max, and Curtis or Robin will send out an email to all the participants so you can have those.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, this is Edna from Central Union Mission. And
Hi.
I had a question in reference to the volunteers. How do they equate the time and the hour, and then as opposed to something that a gift or a pledge already tells you the amount of money, right? That they're donating. But the volunteers, how do you change the hours? How does that work?
So when you fill up your shopping basket in CFC Giving, there's a column right there that says, if the charity, if you've got 5 or 6 charities in your shopping basket on CFC Giving, some of those may accept volunteer hours. And it gives you a place right there in the same page to check if you're going to give hours to this group in addition to money. And then when you move to the next step, it does prompt you, probably only about half of our donors release their names when they give cash. But we have probably 4 prompts in the system that says, if you're going to commit volunteer time, we encourage, we don't require people to release their names. And so that will be still up to the individual.
But how would the charity say, well, they've done 10 hours at $20 an hour? What does that mean money-wise for the charity?
We only do that monetary calculation at the front end. So as you go through the listing phase with the CFC system, the initial deadline is mid-August. The late deadline is the end of August.
Right.
Charities have the ability to tell us how much is an hour of volunteer service worth.
Right.
And we use that number to calculate. So if somebody pledges, 10 hours of volunteer time and the charity says this is worth $10 an hour to us, it's $100 of volunteer time. That we do not calculate the fulfillment of those pledges. That is up to the individual. So we can't calculate beyond that, but we can tell you, you have this much in cash pledges, this many hours, and those hours based upon the numbers you give us is how it translates into a monetary equivalent. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Sure. Question, where will the charity jobs be listed? So when you're searching in the CFC giving system, every charity has an information card. So if you drill in, before you launch out of the CFC system to go to visit their website, a card will pop up with the details of that charity. It might have the their name, their listing, the basic listing information, but it'll also include now those volunteer jobs that they've got. So first, you'll be able to see it on the charity's card in the system. Second, there'll be a report. So one of the things during the pandemic, because people weren't volunteering, we had to collect virtual volunteer opportunities manually. So this volunteer jobs database is going to include actual face-to-face hands-on volunteering, as well as group projects and virtual projects. So we'll be able to do a report and then filter that report in Excel if you want to see what actual volunteer jobs do we have in Cascadia or Pacific Northwest or Desert Southwest. So there'll be cards with more detail about the charity and reports, so that, you know, during the pandemic, a campaign manager would have had to ask us for the manually collected virtual volunteer list. Now we'll be able to sort that virtually or in person and generate a report for a campaign manager who might want to look for a group project or something. This is a little off target for this topic, but how do paper forms get distributed? And that's going to be up to the campaign manager in that location. So the campaign managers will work with their outreach coordinators, and if they are going to actually be distributing paper forms in a post office or at an airport at the TSA station or employee group, they'll make those determinations. We'll certainly have the PDF files available on givecfc.org for anyone who wants to just get the form themselves, download it, fill it out, print it, because they could either turn it into their key worker, or they could just send it directly back to the CCA. Joshua, August 3rd, the Interagency Ethics Council meets, and I'm their guest speaker. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Elizabeth, what's next?
Well, at this time, we could either move into the 15-minute Q&A that covers any topic that was discussed today, or we can give folks a break and come back at 4. Up to you.
I'm fine to keep going. If Gwen and Vanessa are here, we can just keep going. I think the number of questions kind of slowed down. Looking back, it looks like there might have been one question that I see that was asked by Jennifer Lesnick in the last session about the regulation changes. Are there any potential changes to the description of services portion, such as expanding the number of characters? At this point, no. But is that something, I mean, certainly that's something people could let us know. Are you finding that the 240 characters is not sufficient?
Hi, Tony. This is Jennifer. It is difficult to combine everything that our charity members need, because I work with America's Charities, so our federation members that we need to give to OPM under the regulations within 256 characters, because that includes spaces. Like I joke about within our team that we have like smushed words together that were never supposed to be hyphenated or shortened, just to try to get the information across, especially when we have charities whose information is varied across cities. And we need to list all of those cities. We need to list the number of people who were impacted. So ever since the 256 character description came about, a good portion of what we do during the fall leading up to January is wordsmithing and just trying to get everything to fit.
It would be interesting if you could tell us, are there other campaigns that have different limits?
Honestly, we do interact with other like state campaigns that do require description of services, and there are no limits to the like how long the information can be. The ones that spring to mind are several Texas campaigns, and they generally, we are submitting probably a Word document or an Excel document with a description of service like header about what the charity generally does, and then it goes into then the services for that particular location. The CFC is the only one that we've encountered with a word limit, or I'm sorry, a character limit.
Character limit, yeah.
Yeah, for a description of service. We've run, obviously there's 25 word descriptions for like mission statements, but never the service information, which is how all of our charities get approved every 3 years. So we didn't know if, we were looking at potentially expanding that even to 1,000 characters, something that would be a little easier for us. And I know it's not just us. Other charities have come to us and asked for advice on how to get this information to fit. And it is difficult sometimes.
Well, we'd certainly be interested in hearing. I know that as long as we're still producing a PDF file with 5,000 charities listed, quadrupling that space may be problematic in a PDF file. But again, that 5% of the donors that are using paper or, those resources to make a pledge, when it's just an electronic database, it's a little easier to have maybe more information on the charity card. Charity card does include a link to their website. So I would just say, shoot an email to cfc@opm.gov and make your case.
Sure, and I apologize, Tony. This is not the information that gets published for donors. This is the information that goes every 3 years to the reviewers to confirm that they're doing the 15 plus states or the 1 or more countries.
Oh, there is a service.
Yeah, the description of servicing. So it is the same amount of characters per entry that essentially the mission statement or the description of
Okay.
But with more information than we are required for the other portion that we're trying to fit in.
Sure. Well, that becomes less of a regulatory requirement and more of an OPM form, because the charity application is actually considered an OPM form. So I don't know that we need to change that in regulation as much as the next time we have to put that form in for revision. So I would say, make your case and Vanessa and Keith will certainly look at that as we approach the areas of service discussion.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Another question came up if there would be a default that sharing donor information with charities would be an opt-out versus the current opt-in, where I would say right now that's probably not going to be proposed by government staff. But it's certainly something you could make the case for in the comment period. But I'm not aware that government privacy. So the CFC also operates within the privacy guidelines. So I know Keith spent a little bit of time referencing cybersecurity requirements. There also on the OPM website is a document, for those government employees, government speak. It's called the CFC SORN, SORN. It is a System of Records Notice. And there's also a CFC Privacy Impact Assessment. And it is not solely a decision of the CFC about making release of information and opt-in. The system of records and the privacy assessments also need to follow government rules for protecting private information. So before we actually publish regulations, I would just encourage you to take a look at those, because it is really within government privacy laws that we don't release employee information without their consent. The CFC is just one of the many records that would be there. Question, what avenue can a charity take to locate retirees? I will say that there are some public databases of where federal retirees live. And it's probably not a secret nor a surprise if I say they live in Washington, Florida, Phoenix, Southern California, and right now the fifth one on that is failing me. It may just be because they count Virginia and Maryland separately. So there are public, you can find in public reference databases, magazines, lists of organizations of retired Foreign Service officers, unions with retired members, military, retired officers, retired enlisted. So there are a lot of organizations that continue to cultivate federal employees once they're outside the workforce. And, there's nothing stopping you from going to their websites and their newsletter editors to make your case. But, I would say, if you concentrate on those top 5 markets, that's not to say that a letter carrier in Minneapolis doesn't retire and stay right there in Minneapolis. The number of federal employees in some of the other markets just may be considerably smaller. I'm not necessarily planning to move to Minneapolis if I retired. Might move to Myrtle Beach, but probably more people are moving south than north. But I'd probably like to visit Minneapolis. So, but I think smart marketing people can help you find the publications and organizations that retired federal employees are a part of. So the question on when the 2023 campaign information will be posted. We have approved a lot of the marketing materials, so I think you're going to start seeing those coming out over the next week. We are updating the CFC, the givecfc.org website, and that'll probably go live in early August. And then the charity list will be available at the end of August. Oh no, Texas made the cut, Wendy. Absolutely. That was the 5th one. People are moving to Texas. I forgot that one. And I used to live there.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. So, okay. Thank you.
Sure. No property taxes. Who wants property taxes in retirement, right? Okay.
I heard Nashville's the place to be.
Okay. Any questions live? I've tried to go back and read at the same time. Well, I'm Curtis and Elizabeth. I'm happy to stay around for another 5 or 10 minutes if anybody wants to hang out and continue to ask questions.
And I think we can go ahead and adjourn for the day. Sounds like we've exhausted the Q&A. You did such an excellent job as always doing it. So we'll thank everybody for your time. Hopefully you're planning on coming back tomorrow for the next day of training, because we have a lot of great stuff coming up. And you'll continue to use the same link that you used today for tomorrow and for Thursday as well. And we'll look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
And if something comes to you tonight, I put our ghost mail in the chat, cfc@opm.gov. See y'all tomorrow.